My check one two.
Chill. Yeah, call me after 11. Call me after 11. Call me after 11. Okay, after 11, 11. I did do work.
Check one two. 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 Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Talk to me now. Brother, you are good to go. Gentle, gentle. Format. Hello. Check one two. Check one two. Check.
Sorry, stay on by.
Check one two. Check one two. Check one two. Check one two.
Alpha.
Hello, 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 hello. My testing one two. Hello, hello.
Be able to. the name person. Wow. But that distance is still a challenge, isn't it?
Okay.
Broadcast. And a seamless transmission. We have to leave at 7 or 8. Wow. That is tight. Wow. I can imagine. I only went there once and we got there late. So the segment had pretty much almost ended. It was traffic. Right.
Hello, 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 hello. Gentle, they hear me? Are you sure? Wait, I talk now. Gentle. Gentle, see fly. Gentle, see fly. Gentle, see fly. Fly.
webinar is an initiative of the SMEZone. Now you may be wondering, what is the SMEZone? The SMEZone is an amazing platform where entrepreneurs can discuss topical issues that affect their businesses and also gain insightful knowledge and solutions to their businesses through capacity building courses, online webinars, and networking. My name is Ufoma Afe, Product Manager, Business Banking Division, and I'll be your host for today. Before we proceed, we'd like to set some ground rules. For viewers watching via YouTube, we encourage that you use the chat box below your presentation screen to drop your feedback, comments, and questions. For participants viewing in branch locations, we advise that you pass your questions to the coordinators in your various locations. For participants in-house, some papers will be passed. We advise you write your questions. And during the live session, when you're called upon, we advise that only the questions that were written in the papers should be asked. When sending in your questions, feedback, or comments, we advise that you use your name and designation. For instance, Emeka Adebayo Ahmed, MD CEO, Emeka & Sons Limited. Please note that all comments, questions, and feedback would be screened, and only those found to be constructive and helpful, and those that pertain to the subject matter will be entertained. At the end of the webinar, we'll be taking questions from participants as can be accommodated within the time frame. Thank you for joining the webinar. Productivity is never an accident. It is always as a result of commitment to excellence, intelligent planning, and a focused effort. A renowned American author, Dale Carnegie, once said that 1 hour of planning can save you 10 hours of doing. It is in light of this that we'll be bringing to you the 2020 outlook for SME businesses in Nigeria. We have in the house best-in-class experts who would help to simplify key issues, policies, and forecasts for the coming year, for the year we're in and the new decade, to enable you, our viewers, position yourselves to be able to thrive in the economic environment. Some of the topics which will be treated include the new Nigerian Finance Bill, the 2020 Federation Budget, Brexit, ban closure of borders, amongst others. To discuss this, allow me to introduce you to the panelists. On my left, yes, is Mr. Bismarck Rwani. Mr. Bismarck Rwani is an economist, bank and financial analyst with over 30 years of experience. He is a graduate of the University of Ibadan with a bachelor's honors degree in economics and has worked with several blue-chip financial institutions in Nigeria and abroad, holding several management positions. He's a chartered member of the Institute of Bankers of England and Wales, and also a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Bankers. Mr. Rwani has served on several boards on several organizations, including NAFDAC, a vital group subsidiary, NLNG Prize Award Foundation, Unit Insurance PLC Nigeria, Economic Summit Group, UBA Custodian Limited, Virgin Nigeria Airways Limited, Zenith Bank PLC, First Money Bank PLC, and Tokyo Nigeria Limited, as well as Guinness Bank Nigeria. Mr. Rwani is currently the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company Limited in Lagos. Welcome, Mr. Bismarck.
Thank you.
All right. To my far left is Taiwo. To my right is Taiwo Oyedele. He's an author, public speaker, and thought leader on tax and business matters. He's a member of the Ministerial Committee on Implementation of Nigerian National Tax Policy. I was a member of the working group on VAT. He's a contributor to the annual Doing Business report of the World Bank, which compares the relative ease of doing business in 190 economies worldwide. Mr. Oyedele is a fellow of the Nigerian Leadership Initiative and a member of the Corporate Governance Society of Nigeria. He's the chairman of the Taxation and Fiscal Policy Management Board of ICANN, member of the Nigerian Taxation Standards Board, and previously served on ACCA Global Governance Council for 6 years. He's also a member of PwC Global Board for Leadership Development. Mr. Oyedele is an alumnus of Harvard Kennedy School and Yale University. He's the founder and president of Impact African Foundation and a guest lecturer at the University of Lagos, Babcock University, and Lagos Business School. Welcome, Tayo. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
On my far left is Arutore Odiri. He's also known as Rotus. He's an economics graduate with a minor in business administration from the University of Houston. He's the host of Business Hub, an SME-focused radio program on 98.1 FM in Lagos, and a television anchor and analyst on Arise TV Global Business Report. Welcome, Ruth. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you.
So let's jump right into it. Like I said, for viewers watching on YouTube, use the chat box to drop your comments, feedback, or questions. While for people in branch locations and participants here, please pass to the coordinator. Thank you very much. I'll be starting with Mr. Bismarck.
Yep.
Okay. What is the projected GDP growth rate in Nigeria for 2020, and how do you see this impacting on MSMEs in Nigeria?
Firstly, I think the projection, the most optimistic projection I've seen recently is that of the IMF, which is 2.5% rate of growth.
Okay.
I think the World Bank has a much more conservative view, which is about 2.3%. And the Economic Intelligence Unit has a much more conservative view as well of 2%. But as we all know, the Article 4 review is taking place with the IMF right now. That's going to be winding up tomorrow. And from all indications, it would appear that the IMF is going to be scaling back their projections to something like 2.3 or 2.1%. And the question is that why? This is because of many exogenous factors. Some of it, the border closure. Some of it, the sharp decline in the price of oil because of the coronavirus. And also OPEC's enforcement of the rules on production quota. So having said that, 2.1% growth, if that is what is going to be in 2020 compared to about 2.2 average for 2019, then let's look at it in the context of population growth. The population growth rate, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, is 2.6%, but the National Population Commission says it's 3.2%. Having said that, there's no way that our growth rate would exceed the population growth rate, not to talk of the growth in the rate of unemployment. So it comes back to a growth that is suboptimal, a growth that is non-inclusive, and a growth that is not going to make a dramatic impact on the lives of people. We must also know that the growth is positive. It's not, we are not in a recession, we are not in a slowdown, but we are in a very difficult place. Now, how does this affect Joe Bloggs or any other, all the young entrepreneurs, early stage, middle stage, and late stage entrepreneurs in this country? Knowing very well that 39.9% of Nigerians are entrepreneurs, the highest level in the world. It will affect you in so many ways. One, that growth can only increase if there's an increased level of investment. And what are the things that are going to drive investment? You are, at this point, in what we call a declining interest rate environment. A declining interest rate environment means that, theoretically, you should be able to borrow money at cheap rates, right? At rates anything between 12, 15, 20%, as against 30 to 40% in the past. But the interest rate scenario is a double-edged sword. The inflation numbers are coming out on the 17th of February. All projections show that it's going to be about 12.05. It's now about 11.98. So if the rate of inflation is 12% and the rate of interest on your treasury bills is about 3.5% or 4%, it means that you lose 8% per annum by going to bed. So how do we change this? How do we mobilize savings and channel it towards investment so that it will create opportunities for you out there is the big challenge. Those are the things that you're going to see. And this year, watch out for a couple of things. One, the completion of the Lagos-Ibadan rail, which is a game changer in terms of logistics of moving people and goods from Apapa. It's going to help decongest Apapa. Look out for the embedded electricity solutions. Look out for the new electricity tariffs. Look out for concessioning of the airports. Look out for completion of some of the roads. Look out for the deep seaport project along this highway here, the Ekwe Highway. And look out for the completion of the fertilizer plant by Dangote, which will happen next month. All of these things have multiplier effects on what we call the accelerator, capital accelerators, that are going to help Nigerians. And then you, as part of the value chain, throughout this area, especially in agri, healthcare, telco, and all, electronic payment systems. All of you are going to benefit from it. Initially, there will be a slowdown in purchasing power because, as you know, on 1st of February, the new VAT rate kicked in. As you know, the minimum wage, for those of you who are employing more than 20 people, you have to pay a minimum of 30,000. For those of you who are engaging youth corpers, you know that the youth corps allowance has gone up to 33,000 from 19,800. And there are 500,000 of youth corpers out there. So all of these things come together to create an environment in which there are challenges, but more than anything else, there are opportunities. And you must recognize that. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much.
Ufuma, I just want to add, just want to quickly add something Mr. Rwane just said. I just want folks to know that as far as unemployment is concerned, we should remember that the Bureau of Statistics, the last unemployment statistics that we got was in Q3 2018. And at that time, it was 20%. About 20.1, 20.2 million Nigerians were out of work. We haven't gotten an update since that time, so I think we should keep in mind that with regards to your hiring and so on, that figure has probably increased since that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rotus. Tayo, I'm sure most of our viewers have heard of the new Nigerian Finance bill, and they would want more insight on it. So can you just tell us what is the new Nigerian Finance bill and what does it entail?
Yeah, it's now a Finance Act because it was signed into law by Mr. President on the 13th of January 2020. And I know the message out there that everybody knows about is that VAT rate is no longer 5%, it is now 7.5%. But the truth is that this Finance Act is the most transformative in a generation. The last time anything close to this happened was in 1999, before the current democratic dispensation. But in terms of scale, it wasn't close to this. So this Finance Act has over 100 amendments to 7 different tax laws affecting different areas, particularly MSMEs, but also to promote the ease of doing business and protect the vulnerable people in Nigeria. So on the VAT, for example, where the rate has gone up from 5 to 7.5%, the good news is that the list of items that are not liable to VAT, we call them exempt items, were also expanded to cover what mostly the vulnerable and poor people would consume: food, medical care, health care, education, all of that are exempted from VAT. So in a nutshell, that's the way I would summarize the Finance Act.
Okay. So
I was in the restaurant last week and they charged me 7.5. Obviously, I wasn't there to play golf. I was there to eat food. So how does that exempt kick in terms of when I go to a restaurant?
Yes, so it's an issue of education actually, and I think government should have done better. We thank Access Bank for this platform. So you find that what most people have done, I've also tried it myself, went to the mall, and I saw the only thing they changed was the 5% to 7.5%. They haven't bothered to look at the list of items that they were charging VAT on to exclude the ones that are no longer liable to VAT. For example, bread was previously liable to VAT. Bread is now exempt from VAT. So most of the food items you will consume are not liable to VAT. It's a very long list. Unfortunately, we can't go through it during this program. So I would say, from the point of education, you need to question when you are charged VAT to be sure that the person charging you knows what they're doing and not just increasing your cost unnecessarily.
Maybe you walk around with the list.
That might be a good idea. I carry the list. I see your guy show me.
Okay, based on the new Directive 14 for all bank accounts, how would this affect individuals and businesses currently in Nigeria?
Yeah, so this is a very good question because I see that the media has misrepresented what the Finance Act is saying. So there are two issues. One, if you have a corporate account, for example, you are a limited liability company, you have a bank account, you already have a requirement to present your TIN, your tax identification number. What the Finance Act has added now is to say, if you operate your personal account, but you use it for business purposes, So you should also get a tin, because it means that you are generating money, you make profit, you should pay taxes. So if your account is just for personal purposes, no business, you don't have to worry. If you use your account for business purposes, you have to get your tin. The good thing about tin is it does not mean you have to pay tax. It only means that you have to register with the tax authorities. That registration can be done at any tax offices nationwide. You can also do it online. If you go to the JTB website, jtb.gov.ng, and you'll be able to register. So this is a very simple thing to do for those who are doing businesses.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's very fantastic. Rotus, in recent weeks, we've heard of the US immigration policies impacting Nigerians and coronavirus, and we're aware that Nigeria does a lot of business with China. So how do you see this affecting businesses in Nigeria?
Well, the U.S. Visa restriction is with reference to non-immigrants who are trying to relocate over there. So if you're, as far as going over and doing business there,
Okay.
that's still fine. The coronavirus and what's going on with China, that of course does have, that's going to have an impact, because when you look at trade and you look at a lot of people that travel back and forth to China to bring goods in, that is something that is definitely going to affect them, and there will be an impact, which we've already even seen so far. What Mr. Iwane was referring to, oil prices going down, even natural gas. One of the biggest companies there put in a force majeure to restrict LNG imports coming in, and so it's widespread. But specifically for businesses in Nigeria who trade a lot with China. Remember the currency swap that we did with China, where we're supposed to facilitate businesses for Nigerian businesses that were doing business in China. That's the reason why we did that currency swap, because that was the government acknowledging the amount of trade and businesses that go on trade between the two countries. So the impact is going to be felt by businesses.
Okay.
I think one point you have to notice that 19% of total trade of Nigerian imports come from China. China is our largest trading partner. Not only are they our trading partner, they invest almost all your infrastructure projects, from power to rail to roads to airports, are provided by the Chinese. So we have the one naira swap. We have the Chinese as investors. We have the Chinese as technical partners who are running these rails and satellites. And also we have the Chinese as trading partners. And one way to look at this is that the passenger traffic out of Nigeria has shifted from going west to going east. That is why Emirates is the largest carrier of passengers in Nigeria. They have 2 flights into Lagos every day and 1 flight out of Abuja, followed by Qatar, Etihad, Turkish, Ethiopia. All of these airlines have trader traffic, medical tourism traffic, and professional traffic. All of this looking eastwards. Their visa policies are not as restrictive as they are. So for now, that's going to have an impact. And one of the projections, when we said the revision of our estimates for GDP growth in 2020 is because of 1, coronavirus, 2, the trade war between the US and China, and of course all other things happening in Vietnam, Malaysia, and others. So it's going to be a tough Q1 as far as this is concerned, and maybe a tough Q2 as well.
Okay. So what I hear from what Mr. Arwani and Rotis have said, the impact is going to be really tremendous. So are there alternative solutions? What opportunities can we explore now that, for now, considering what is currently going on?
With the figures that Mr. Arwani has given, China is a sizable trading partner. So, I mean, if you're a business, if you travel to China and you bring goods in to sell here and you're involved with them, you want to consider switching. But then, where do you switch to with regards to the volume of business that you're doing? So, it's possibly right now a wait and see approach with regards to what's going on. I should also point out our benchmark oil is $57 per barrel for $57 per barrel for night, and it's dropped to, I think it was even 53 last night. So that's also something else to keep an eye on. So yes, you know.
I think also, see, these projects in which the Chinese are involved are not things that started overnight. The Mambila power project, which is a $6 billion project, I've been on the drawing board for God knows how many years. So the thing is that the resilience of an economy and a people is that there will be things. Ebola came and went, but it had a tremendous impact. The Ebola came again in Democratic Republic. Lassa fever is here. Coronavirus is there.
SARS.
But the thing, I don't know how far it's correct. The coronavirus, it cannot survive in a tropical environment. It's actually a temperate region, so that's why you're not having it here. But having said that, that doesn't mean we should just go out there and embrace it. You see, resilience and strategic planning, which means that if any of these things happen, how are we going to respond? China, in 11 days or 14 days, they were able to build a complete hospital end to end. We have been struggling with resurfacing the Falamo bridge in the last 2 weeks, and it's been quite a challenge. So I want you to understand that people who are organized well enough to build complete hospitals in 14 days, a country that is having difficulty resurfacing one lane, one side of the Falamo bridge, shows you the preparedness of both countries for emergencies.
Okay. Mr. Rwani, what other economic indicators do you think businesses should watch out for in this new year and decade?
First of all, everybody should understand that the things outside our control are more than the things within our control. We have no control over oil price. We have no control over oil production because OPEC will determine the quota. We have no control over the weather. It's said that the first rainfall is on the 24th of February, according to the projections. You know that you're going to have an early rainfall and there will be some floods and all that. However, I think that you should be looking out for rate of interest, because the current rates of interest may not be sustainable. The low interest rate environment, there will be a point of inflection. I think that you said, okay, without China, what happens? We should be looking out for the fact that the border will be reopened at some point in time. I don't know when, but I think conversations are on around that. And that, all of those things point to the fact that there are external vulnerabilities and domestic changes that will take place. Resilience is not just about preparing for Ebola or coronavirus. It's about preparing to alter your investment and production function to take advantage of domestic opportunities. America will have bans on immigration and all that. Everybody would protect themselves. The solution, final solution, is fixing your own domestic economy. If your economy is fixed, nobody's going to start putting a ban on this or a ban on that for you. And so the African opportunity, the West African ECOWAS opportunity, the ECOWAS opportunity, the African Continental Free Trade opportunity, the fact that at some point in time our currency is going to become convertible just like other currencies in the world, the fact that our markets are going to attract investments, the fact that money is fungible means that a small-scale business in Nigeria has the opportunity of the Nigerian market and has the opportunity to trade across the total African region. I think that is the beauty, but you cannot trade and you cannot win if you are not competitive. If it costs you 20 naira to produce something in Nigeria, when it can be imported and smuggled at the cost of 10 naira, there's no way you can survive in the business. So that is it. You must be globally and domestically competitive, no matter what you do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Back to the Finance Act, right? Yes. So what does this act have to offer small businesses that are not registered, that are not organized, to ensure that it gets formalized? Is there any framework in place for that?
Yes, indeed. I know that nobody is excited to pay tax. So many people would rather not formalize their businesses because it means that they become more visible, yes, and they ask them to pay taxes. So the good news now is if you're a small business, which is defined by if your turnover, that's your sales, in a calendar year, January to December, is under 25 million naira. If you trade every day, that's about 70,000 naira per day. If you have 1 day to rest in a week, that's about 80,000 naira per day sales. If you sell below that, you don't need to register for VAT, you don't need to charge VAT on what you're selling, goods and services. So that's to encourage you to grow. Number 2 is that if you have your business registered with CAC as a company, your company income tax rate from 30% is now 0%, so you don't have to pay company income tax as a small business. If you're a little bit bigger than that and your turnover is more than 25 million up to 100 million, your company income tax rate is now down from 30% to 20%. Now, the other important information is that when you do your online transactions, including when you go to the first station to buy petrol, the stamp duty that we used to pay before on 1,000 naira or more, the threshold has now gone up to 10,000. So until your single transaction is up to 10,000, you shouldn't pay the stamp duties. So if anybody asks you to pay, challenge them to say that is wrong based on the Finance Act, that you are not going to pay. So these are some of the, so because now you don't have to charge VAT, your income tax rate is 0%, it's actually a good time for small businesses to formalize, because there are a lot of advantages to when you formalize your business, including access to credit and so on and so forth.
Okay. All right, thank you so much for that answer. I have certain sectors here that I would want to split amongst us, if that's okay. I'd like to get advice or recommendations for customers in these sectors. So, Mr. Bismarck, for ICT and health sectors, what recommendations, what advice do you have for customers that do business there?
As we look at the sectors, we should actually bear in mind the value chain from beginning to end. It depends on where you want to take advantage. As far as I know, in healthcare, the shift and the link with technology, the shift has gone more to diagnostic, right? Preventive rather than treatment and therapeutic and all that. And also after procedural care. So we find out that over 80% of the amount spent on treatment, right, has been saved because things were detected early. People knew the tendency and therefore changed their habits, their diet, their exercise, their workflow, and all of that. So, and the evidence of this is shown in the fact that life expectancy, even though very low, is still 53 years in Nigeria, is improving. It was much lower than that. And all things being equal, if we, the quality of life continues to improve, that can easily catch up with a place like Ghana where it's 62, 63, right? So I think, one, the shift towards preventive and diagnostic medicine. Two, the use of technology to, even IBM has what they call the Watson and all, Google, everybody, they have the Fitbits and all of these things, make people understand that. Now, coming back to the ICT space, if you look at total number of transactions taking place, financial transactions in Nigeria, they've gone by leaps and bounds. But there's almost a 90% growth in electronic payments relative to cash payments, and a massive decline in checks being used. So the electronic payment system, the e-commerce space for retail, right? And then also, what it leads to is an increase in the velocity of circulation of money. Kenya, which is the first country the United States picked out to do bilateral trade with in Africa, in trying to displace what they call the AGOA, we find that Kenya was at the forefront of the M-Pesa experiment. So now with ICT, you've seen this. Typical example, e-tagging on the Lekki Bridge was able to decongest by almost 40% the traffic situation in Bodilon, Alexandra, and all the other places. What did it do? It increased the revenue collected, reduced the leakages, and increased the productivity of Nigerians. That is just one solution. You are going to see that play out in the new rail stations. You are going to see that play out in so many things. So the days of electronic payment settlement higher velocity of circulation of money, reduction in your credit requirements because you get instant value. All of this have become, we are here on a webinar process right now, and people are seeing us in their different locations. All of them would have had to come here, congested themselves in traffic. So we have board meetings via video conferencing. We have Skype calls, even on TV programs. And so the world is becoming much more efficient. But you have to be competitive, and you have to differentiate yourself with your value proposition. I think that is what is. It doesn't matter whether you're at the bottom of the pyramid or at the top of the pyramid. The truth is that opportunities are out there, and capacity and versatility and is being rewarded as against just energy. To put it in context, of the top 30 companies in the Dow Jones in 1929, when they had the great crash, I think only 2 are surviving today. Of the top 20 companies in the world today in terms of value, not more than 18 of them were in existence 30 years ago. So they are new, they are bold, they are innovative, they are creative, and more than anything else, the route to success, whilst it is there are opportunities, the route to failure is also there if you don't reinvent yourself.
Just wanted to add just one thing to add on the healthcare sector. If you're in the healthcare sector and you're doing business in healthcare, do watch what's going on with insurance. The NICOM is currently carrying out a recapitalization exercise for insurance businesses. It's a sector that needs to be consolidated, and so there are moves towards making sure they can recapitalize. Healthcare, of course, is related to insurance, so people can facilitate payments for it. So if you're in healthcare, watch the recapitalization exercise that's going on in the insurance sector, because that's going to have an impact on your customers being able to pay for what you.
Okay, Roses, I need you to speak to education and agriculture sector.
Agriculture, education. Agriculture, as we know, it's what the largest, one of the largest contributors towards GDP, but it is so far it's largely subsistence farming that we're seeing, right? A lot of this, what we're seeing in that sector, a lot of farmers are just pretty much trying to provide for themselves. We need to move towards mechanized farming and increasing our yield per hectare with what it is that we provide as far as that sector is concerned. So if you're in the agricultural space, you should be encouraged. I mean, if you look at the Anchor Burrows program, if you look at the president saying that a lot of Nigerians should look towards going towards agriculture, it's, I believe, one of the largest sort of employment. You should be encouraged. But the thing is, there are challenges there. Mr. Rwanda has already talked about the value chains. Lack of power means you can't store a lot of perishable goods. The infrastructure to get crops from the farms over to urban centers to sell, there's that challenge there. So there are a lot of challenges there, but because of the focus that the federal government has placed there, I would be encouraged. But there's still a lot of, as far as infrastructure is concerned, there's still a lot of improvement that needs to happen there for the agricultural sector to move forward. Education also, I believe UNICEF has a requirement. I believe that about 15% of a nation's budget should at least go towards the education sector. I haven't quite met that, and we know that if you want to move a nation forward, education is where funds have to go into. So if you're in education, the private schools and the private sector, that's done relatively well, I would say. But by and large, there's something I want to point out with regards to each of these sectors that we're talking about. You're dealing with FX, right, as far as import-exports are concerned. And the central bank, if you look at, I was just looking at their Q4 economic report. I believe that 2019 is the first year that the central bank has a negative spread with regards to inflows and outflows for foreign exchange. That is, they've been paying out more than has been coming in. So, as far as the central bank is concerned, the foreign reserves are fine. I believe it's at 38 billion or so now. 37 now. It's dropped. There's pressure, and so with pressure on the central bank as well as foreign exchange, that might lead to demand management, and that's going to spread across whatever sector that you're involved in. So you want to look at your, dollar assets, making sure that you can prepare yourself for a possible, I'm not saying it will happen, Yeah, exactly. The D word, I won't say it, you said it, thank you. So as far as that's concerned, you also have to watch out for that as well with regards to
Okay, Mr. Taiwo, could you speak to trade and services?
Yes, yes, indeed. But first, let me even mention a couple of comments around ICT. So the Finance Act now requires that if you procure ICT services from outside Nigeria, you have to charge VAT. The good thing about this is that it makes the local providers more competitive, because in any case, they have to charge the tax, and those providing those services from abroad were not. For healthcare, the medical products are exempt from VAT. In addition to that, the Finance Act says locally produced sanitary towels and pads are no longer liable to VAT, so that is good news. For education, tuition from nursery to secondary, tertiary is exempt from VAT. If you are into agricultural business, agricultural production has an 8-year tax exemption. For 8 years, you not pay income taxes at all. And then finally, to trade and services, I think what I would like to say is, for small businesses, it's important for you to keep proper record, because all of these incentives and waivers and concession in the Finance Act require that you're able to demonstrate, your level of turnover, what you're doing. So I would encourage our viewers and businesses to use their bank cards. Use when you are transferring anything, paying for anything online, describe it properly so that you can explain. When you drive into a first station to buy fuel, collect the receipt or use your POS and keep the document that you have. Overall, I think the Finance Act, the biggest winners are the small business owners.
Okay. All right, thank you. Rochus, are there any other sectors that you think would propel the Nigerian economy in 2020?
Outside of the ones we've already
mentioned?
mentioned?
Outside of the ones that we've already mentioned.
Oil and gas, perhaps. I mean, I know we're trying to diversify. Okay, so Nigerian economy is diversified. The issue is that Nigeria's revenue is what's not diversified, and that still is heavily dependent on oil and gas. I believe it was in December of last year that a deal was signed between the NNPC, Shell, Total, and Eni, the shareholders that NLNG, yes, for Train 7, which is another export, hopefully another export outlet for natural gas. Even though natural gas prices have been dropping, though, that sector we haven't mentioned. I know we're supposed to diversify away from there, but oil and gas is still our main revenue earner for Nigeria, and so that is another sector that's.
What of the creative sector?
Oh yeah, the creative sector. So that definitely. I mean, I understand there's is it a 90 billion fund or so that was supposed to be put together for creatives. I know the National Theatre is supposed to be revamped and also by the central bank in order to boost that. So creatives as well. If you look at our creative industry, that is definitely an outlet for us. But there are a few challenges with regards to music and film. There's the piracy issue, that is very, very rampant in that sector. But challenges aside, thank you for adding that. The creative sector does have potential.
Let me just go in a few things. I think it's important to understand that the assumption that oil will always be there is a very generous assumption. The reality is that by the year 2030, India, our largest customer in terms of crude oil, would have stopped using diesel-powered cars. All the new cars produced from 2030 are going to be electric. Britain has brought it date back to 2035, right? So I think the obsolescence of oil and the growing irrelevance of OPEC means that we cannot count on that source of revenue for too long. The earlier we know it, the better. It is a national emergency. And people think 10 years is a long time. 10 years is nothing. It's nothing. So this is 2020. 2021 is just around the corner. We are dealing with a national emergency in terms of the relevance of oil and the fact that we need to press the reset button very quickly on all other sectors.
Okay, that's fantastic. So we'll take some questions from our viewers. We've gotten some questions in. Mr. Briwani again.
Yes.
What impact will African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the introduction of ECO have on the 2020 outlook?
First of all, I do not think that the ECO as a convertible currency for the region will take off in the next 2 to 3 years, because the custom union takes about 10 years between the custom union trade parties and the common currency. In Europe, it took more than that before you had the euro. Secondly, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has been signed, ratified, and by 2022, which is 2 years from now, all goods produced in any African country, as long as the country of origin is in Africa, would attract maximum of 5% import duty. In other words, if I buy a Toyota car manufactured in Rosebank, South Africa, or a BMW car manufactured in South Africa, that car will attract 5% duty. If I buy the same car, Corolla or Corona or BMW or Mercedes, from Germany or from Japan, based on today's tariff, I'll be paying 70%. So that car, that same car, made in South Africa, will be 65% cheaper than the car manufactured. On the other hand, cement that is produced in Nigeria, right, in Dangote's factory, or any of the products produced here by Nestle, Milo, and others, will have no duty. So you'll be able to export from here across the region. Now, will the infrastructure be there to carry these goods across? Will the pipelines be there to take the refined products from Dangote's refinery and other refineries across the rest of West Africa? Those are the things that we should be focusing on now, because we are going to go from what we call a natural wealth economy to a produced wealth economy, where productivity will be the way to the future.
Okay. We advise viewers watching via YouTube and branch locations to attach their name and designation when sending in your questions. Okay, this question is from Adenike Olumide Emmanuel. She says, some businesses are imputing VAT in their bills. Do we have to keep paying as individuals now that we know that we won't be remitting same to the government?
Yeah, no, it depends. It doesn't mean like the government has not said everybody should stop charging VAT. They're only saying that for small businesses, they don't need to charge VAT. So number one thing is you need to try and establish whether that's a small business. It will be difficult for you to do. But the second thing you can do is to try and understand the list of items on which VAT is not applicable, so that if you're asked to pay VAT on bread or milk or cereal, you can say no, and try and go around with a list like Bismarck said. So, and finally, the charge you have to pay, it is the duty of the FRS to ensure that whoever collects VAT remits to government.
Okay, but for now, there is no agency where you could report if you're being charged VAT on an item that you're not supposed to be charged.
Yeah, FRS is working on that, so their guidelines will be out very soon. In fact, what they want to do also is to create a whistleblowing platform where you can report the things you consider are not being appropriate for someone to take necessary actions.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, Mr. Rotus, what are your opinions on the World Bank's growth projections for Nigeria?
Oh, I mean, Mr. Rawani addressed that earlier when we started, and that's the World Bank essentially, in fact, speaking of the World Bank, they just released, although this was for 2016, a report on, I believe it was poverty, stuff that we already know, of course, that 87% of poverty is unfortunately in the north. And the report, it was again from 2016, they were talking about what needs to be done in order to raise individuals out of poverty. The World Bank projections, I believe that they've been pretty conservative, but I think that they are relatively accurate. They have essentially told the nation what it needs to do in order to provide the drivers for growth, and I see them as pretty accurate as far as the projections are concerned.
All right. So this question is directed to Mr. Rawani. What Okay, this has been asked. Is there a public, okay, for Mr. Taro, is there a public domain where we can access services and products that are VAT exempt?
I would say yes and no. First and foremost, you can get a copy of the Finance Act from the internet. If you just go and type Finance Act 2019 on Google, you find it. And just try and go down.
Is it 2019 or 2020?
It's supposed to be 2020, but the law says 2019. I think it was a mistake on the part of government. The intention was that this would be signed into law in 2019, but it didn't happen until 2020, but the date was already there. So they left it, so officially it's 2019. And I need to say also that the commencement of that Finance Act by law is 13th of January. But the finance minister said we can implement it from 1st of February to give people time to adjust their system.
Okay.
So if you Google it and you get a copy, you can just print out, it's about 2 pages where you see the list of things that are not liable to VAT. Put it in your pocket, or you can take a picture of it on your phone, and then you just confirm whether you should pay VAT or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rotus, how do you think the closure of the border is impacting economic growth?
Well, we've seen the impact in inflation. Again, I think the border closure happened in August of last year, of 2019. It was in August, so that still has to play out. But Mr. Rana has already mentioned this already. Inflation has been creeping up at 11.98%. Inflation for January be out in about a week or two. I think a week, and I believe that it should be 12.05 is the projection. So that's impacting on the disposable income of Nigerians, with regards to what they're going to be spending on food. Majority of Nigerians, as far as their expenses are concerned, majority of expenses go towards food. So disposable income is the main impact. More pressure on that now reduces the ability to be able to spend on other items.
So, something you must know about the border closure is that I think the last data I saw was that of the 35,000 base stations which the telcos use, 3,000 of them are inactive in the sense that those are the ones around the border area where you cannot get diesel to. 1. 2, the smugglers have already found a way around the border closure. So most of the things that were not coming in are now coming in at a premium. More important is that in September and October, the amount of PMS utilization in Nigeria, that's petrol, had come down from 60 million liters a day to as low as 40 million liters a day. But last time I checked, it had gone back up, which means that whatever it was, the border closure was trying to actually reduce the amount of petrol being imported and smuggled out. People have found their way around it. So it cannot be a permanent solution. No country in the world can have a permanent solution about closing its borders. So the economy has to be competitive. We have to produce. We have to produce competitively, and we have to understand that we are in a world of international trade, not a world of domestic trade.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Arwani. Do you have any questions from the audience? Okay.
Let's take a question.
We'll take a question from the audience.
Well, my name is Dr. Olatunji Nasser.
Okay.
MD CEO of Smiles Limited. I'm a soft tissue small muscle surgeon, but I also have a business. The question reads, monies have been very scarce in the marketplace for banks to lend, because that in the last couple of months, even banks that we have approached and have said no in the past are begging us to come and take loans. And very easy rate. For example, I've been with a commercial bank trying to access loan, and it's taking me like 4 or 5 months. It's not been disbursed. But you go to the finance houses within 2-3 days, and I mean it, 2-3 days, they give you your money, even though it's at a very, very high interest rate. some of them 30%, 35%, and all that. But as an investor who wants money immediately, who wants to business as fast as it could, most of the time we are challenged to take, even though you do. So and then this loan, and then you invest in your businesses, and you find out that the purchasing power of the consumer becomes drastically very low. For example, let me put myself on the spot. I've taken loans, I've imported, improved our counters and everything, but people are not coming to buy as they used to. And those who come to buy, if you have to give them on credit, receivables are damn too high. So the loans have become useless because the purchasing power of the consumers has gone down very low. For somebody like me, I'm in the middle of an ocean that I don't know how to sail in front or go backwards, so to say, because the stocks are expired and I'm not selling, and the banks are asking how we can adjust to this new reality and at the same time be in financial health, because as it were, it's just too bad. I'm using myself as an example. It's just too bad.
When you want to sell, the only thing that can increase demand is by bringing down your price. There's a time when you have to bring down your price below your cost to be able to sell, so at least you cut your losses and reinvest and become much more efficient. But the truth is that the border closure, this is a trading economy. 15% of total GDP is for wholesale and retail trade. The informal sector is about 30% of the economy. So the border closure had more than a proportionate impact on everybody's activity. Not only that, too, a lot of people, the older generation, have been living on investment income. In other words, they invest money on in treasury bills. They were getting 14, 13%. Now those guys are getting 2%. So what have they done? They've reduced the amount of money they are spending. They've reduced the amount of money they're giving away to relatives. And so the aggregate effect of one, closure, reduction in trading activity, two, reduction in investment income, has led to this thing. Now the question is, you guys who have responded by increasing your productivity are trying to maintain the same prices, right? And it is that stickiness in price that is the problem. We have to come into some kind of equilibrium, because interest rates are going to go back up, production costs are going to increase, demand is going to increase, but you must be alive as a business to take advantage of the new dispensation coming up next quarter. If your company collapses between now and next quarter, then you won't be around to take advantage. So my advice number one is bring down your price at least so you can sell your products, right? Stock up again, and then compete in the next dispensation. But there are no easy options.
And the only thing I want to add to that is, I think you also need to have a second look at your marketing strategy. How do you get the product to the people? As much as I do agree with you that purchasing power is low in Nigeria, people are still buying. About 80% of the GDP is consumption-based. So if you target what is it that Nigerians are buying, I think some reports say that Nigeria is #1 in the world for the percentage of household income that we spend on food. Yes. So people have to eat. If you get those priorities and where the customers are, maybe that will give you some improvement. Leverage on social media, it's very powerful these days, and hopefully things will get better. So I feel your pain.
My name is Spark Consultant at Time and Company. It's a property services company. And I just want to maybe Mr. Spark wanted to give us the outlook, real estate outlook for 2020.
Real estate. Okay. First and foremost, thank you very much. A very important question. In economics, we have three types of indicators. They are what we call leading economic indicators that happen before a boom. which point to the fact that a boom is coming. There are what we call coincidental indicators, which happen during a boom, and then what we call lagging indicators, things that happen after the boom has taken place. Then real estate is a lagging indicator. In other words, the boom would have taken place, and out of the boom, somebody has made some money, say, okay, let me go and buy land and build a house. A man who has got a job after 6 months or 1 year of staying with his brother now goes to rent a new apartment. Those are the things that drive demand for real estate. But the real estate sector, at this point in time, has two dynamics. One is the dynamics of growth. The second and most important one is the game-changing effect of rail and new highways. Real estate always moves towards the right of way. The fact that if you came from Awoyaya to Victoria Island, it would take you maybe 1-2 hours, depending on the traffic situation. Whilst if I live in Abeokuta or Pakwalanto and I come by train, it will take me 35 minutes to get to Ebutemeta and come here. So, and if you look at the relative rents between Awoyaya and Pakwalanto, Pakwalanto is probably only 10% of. So what's going to happen? Rents in Pakwalanto will increase, while rents in Awoyaya and others will decline, so that there's an equilibrium. Some people are going to relocate. The same thing has happened in any other city where there's a bypass. People move in Ibadan, where the train station is going to come out at Monia, and all. People will move from downtown to Monia. However, before you start relocating, be sure that the train service is going to be constant, that there's no breakdown. Because if there's a breakdown and a part is missing and the train stops for 3 months, you're not going to be able to run back to your former landlord. So it's a judgment call. But really, there will be commercial real estate, there will be office blocks, and there will be residential real estate. I give you an example. After the ETAG, a lot of companies moved from Victoria Island to Ikoyi because it was impossible to move from Ikoyi to go between Ikoyi and Victoria Island at a point. I know 1 or 2 airlines that moved from Churchgate to some offices on Alfred Rawane. But with the ETAG solution, that has used, and some of them are saying, really, and they paid a premium to move from Victoria Island, which was totally congested, to move to Ikoyi. But, the bridge, the ETAG solution. So real estate is also tied to ICT and proper communication and security and all that. So it's a growth area, but you should look at where the right of way is, what the new developments are, like the new refinery and all of that, and then position yourself accordingly.
Yeah, let me just add a few points to the real estate question you asked. One is that the Finance Act, again, also has something for your sector. So interest in land is now exempt from VAT. You don't pay VAT. Number 2 is that for construction of building, the withholding tax used to be 5%, is now down to 2.5%, so they've reduced it. And I also think that the lower interest rate that people are getting on treasury bills is also an opportunity for you to demonstrate the returns you can get on property investment. Before, you were not competitive, because I can get 17, 18 doing nothing. Now I think you're more competitive, and you need to take advantage of that. And the other point is there's a provision in the Finance Act, we call it Real Estate Investment Company. Government has provided the framework within the law that if you create that vehicle to invest in real estate, it doesn't pay any tax at all. It's treated as tax transparent, so that the investors only pay the taxes they need to pay as the investors. And finally, I'll say, look out for trends. Like for example, I was speaking to someone who has properties on the island, and there were no tenants. And I said, why don't you do Airbnb? List a few of them, and then you get, I know it comes with own risk, but you can manage it. So overall, I think it's a space to watch and take advantage of the few opportunities that we have around.
And very quickly, also, you said your property management, yes? Property services, fine. Okay, so in addition to the Airbnb model, workstations also seem to be pretty popular around the areas where folks are just renting office space for a certain amount of time, so you may also want to look at that. But real estate is troubled. I believe Q3
GDP, real estate, I think, contracted.
Declined.
Yeah, it declined. Yeah, so it's still a bit of a challenging sector. But if you look at the alternative models, that's something that you can look at as well.
Okay, we apologize. We cannot take any more questions from the audience. Mr. Rewani, do you have any last words?
Well, let me say 2020 is going to be a tough year, but it's going to be a better year than 2019. But just get ready for some turbulence as we go along.
All right, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you have enjoyed this as much as we did bringing it to you. This link will be active for the next 90 days, so you can tune in again and watch and watch and watch. And the session will also be you can also visit the session by visiting the invite link. However, this webinar would also be available on the SMEZone. Remember, I spoke about the SMEZone before. You can sign in using www.accesssmezone.com to take you to this training again. This conversation continues on Inspiration FM today by 5 p.m. with Taiwo Oyedele. You can also tune in to listen. Thank you for joining us and have a nice day.
Thank you.